In this new superseding indictment, there is a paragraph that is quite telling. Quote, just over 2 weeks after the FBI discovered classified documents in the storage room in Trump's office, Nauta, as in Walt Nauta, called Trump employee number 5 and said words to the effect of, someone just wants to make sure Carlos is good. Carlos, as in Carlos de Oliveira, the Mar-a-Lago maintenance worker, who was added to today's new indictment as a co-conspirator. In response, Trump employee number 5 told Walt Nauta that de Oliveira was loyal and that de Oliveira would not do anything to affect his relationship with Trump. That same day, at Nauta's request, Trump employee 5 confirmed in a Signal chat group with Nauta and the PAC representative that de Oliveira was loyal. That same day, Trump called de Oliveira and told him that Trump would get de Oliveira an attorney. The lawyer Trump got to represent de Oliveira is a man named John Irving, and he has been paid by Donald Trump's Save America PAC, as is an attorney named Stanley Woodward, who is representing 2 other clients involved in this matter, Walt Nauta, Trump's valet, and Yuscil Taveras, the Mar-a-Lago IT worker who is presumed to be employee number 4 in this superseding indictment. Trump, or Trump's leadership PAC, I should say, has made it a practice to pay for legal representation for the witnesses who might have important information as it concerns the former president. It's something the House January 6 committee explored at length after learning that Cassidy Hutchinson, a key witness, had been contacted by Trump allies to make sure that she, Cassidy Hutchinson, remained loyal. Remember that Ms. Hutchinson's first lawyer, Stephen Passantino, was being paid by Trump and was coaching her to tell committee investigators that she did not recall certain critical information. Joining us now is Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California. She was, of course, a member of the January 6th committee. And as she wrote in a recent MSNBC op-ed, Special Counsel Jack Smith is vindicating the committee's work. Congresswoman Lofgren, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I wonder what your thoughts were when you read that paragraph in this indictment about whether Mr. de Oliveira was loyal and whether or not that was the threshold with which he could get an attorney paid for by Trump.
Well, it was reminiscent of the testimony we got from Cassie Hutchinson, and not just that he was loyal, but that finding him a lawyer, making sure that he was on the team would keep him from telling things or revealing things that would be damaging to the ex-president. I mean, Hutchinson's testimony basically was that she wasn't told how much the lawyer was being paid. Basically this lawyer was counseling her not to tell the full truth, and in fact advised her to put herself in a position to be held in contempt of Congress. They dangled jobs in front of her to make sure that she stayed loyal. It's sort of a mobster type approach to people in your, quote, organization. And it sort of reminded me of that.
I know these are sort of incentivized deals, but does this not qualify as witness intimidation?
Well, this was one of the things that the committee referred to the Department of Justice. We're very disturbed about the testimony. We didn't have any, corroborating evidence, but, there were a lot of the witnesses that appeared before the committee were paid for by Trump World. That's their word, not just mine. And it did cause concern. Was that part of the same sort of situation that happened with Ms. Hutchinson? Was it influencing their testimony? Was it keeping these witnesses under control? We were unable to find it out, but it made us very suspicious. And we hope that the Department of Justice would look at it and be able to do more digging than we were able to do.
Well, I mean, we know that in Walt Nauta and employee number 4, which is being reported to be Yuscil Taveras, the head of IT at Mar-a-Lago, they are being represented by Stan Woodward. Woodward is being paid by Trump's PAC. There's a curious sort of dynamic here, which is Yuscil Taveras is clearly, if he is employee number 4, giving a lot of information to the DOJ, maybe even a cooperating witness. Walt Nauta, on the other hand, represented by the same lawyer, is very much not a cooperating witness. Does that strike you as an odd arrangement and potentially problematic as this case moves forward?
Well, it causes some anxiety. It is not necessarily improper for someone to help or assist with the payment of counsel if they're an employee or the like. That per se is not, illegal or improper. But what the concern is that this is being used as a tool to keep a witness under control, to keep them from being fully candid with the Department of Justice. I can't say that that's what's happening here. We don't know that, but it does raise a concern. And really, I guess some of it is stemming from the testimony that Ms. Hutchinson gave us, because clearly that was the pattern that they were using with her. And of course, it didn't work because she was an honest person.
Well, yeah, and that's such a key point. It didn't work with Cassidy Hutchinson because she was an honest person. I mean, in your experience as a lawyer, does it all come down to these clients just sort of looking at their own sort of internal moral compass and saying, what kind of person do I want to be? Or making the sort of naked calculation that Trump might not be reelected and I could be in deep legal peril if I continue to basically align myself with him? I mean, what goes into convincing someone that their lawyer is not the best representative for them?
Well, every person is different, but Ms. Hutchinson told a wonderful story, which was so she was advised to do the look in the mirror test, and that would she be able to look in the mirror and face herself based on what she was doing. And I think that's pretty good advice. If 10 years from now you can't look yourself in the mirror and be proud of what you did, then you ought to think about doing something else. Certainly there are calculations about, will you end up in jail, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, having honor and being truthful is something that we all should do. And, if you're not telling a lie, you never have to worry about what you said before. Just tell the truth.
Truer words have never been spoke. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.